Hi, Ducks. For the last few months, I kept thinking, what's the world gonna look like when I finish the book? Will it be morning? Will I be at home or in a library? And this is more or less what it looked like. I took my dog for a walk over the weekend like I do whenever I'm home, so here are some things that we saw in the neighborhood, and here are some things that I've been thinking about. I submitted my book manuscript this week. I have a book coming out, the first proper collection of my poetry, which will be published this June with Penmanship Press as part of my tenure, I guess, as Youth Poet Laureate of Los Angeles, which is all still a strange and wonderful sentence for me. I've talked about it before, but there are 3 specific instances that I knew I wanted to be a writer. When I was about 6, I walked into the living room and saw my grandmother watching some foreign film. The protagonist was training to become a nun, except it was a romance, so there was a handsome young man in the way of her in the convent. When they kissed, my grandmother, a writer herself in her late 80s and falling from lung cancer, leapt to her feet and yelled, "No! She promised herself to God!" And I suddenly felt very much that I wanted to experience and invite those full-body reactions. I want to live in a society where everyone has memorized lines of poetry that they can just spit out and work into conversation, which means poetry should be accessible to everyone in meaning and form, where it's just part of daily fabric rather than something you have to pay to hear or participate in, and I really hope that I help that in some way. And then, I don't know, I tell this story a lot at shows because it's funny and I only have 2 stories that I can tell well, but in middle school I had tons of crushes on tons of people, so I would write poems so they would like me back, because that's what people like, right? It didn't work, obviously, which is why I'm still doing this. There's a surprising amount of love poems in the book, which I did not expect. They're sort of concentrated in the middle like a leech after feeding. I have opinions. The 3rd instance where I knew I had to be a writer was in my 8th grade English class, and my teacher was head of the department or whatever, so he picked all the books that the whole school read, and he'd just given us this grand speech about how literature invigorated and inspired us to be empathetic by experiencing the lives of others, and then I asked him, not being snarky at all, I thought that I was in on the conversation and had something to contribute, I asked him why we'd only read 1 book about a girl out of like 20 books that we'd read in 3 years, and he told me that he couldn't find any books written by women that were good enough to study. And my heart broke, because he'd been my favorite teacher up to that point, and I swear I was so shocked. And then I literally slept through his class for the rest of the year. I know I have a line in a poem about it, and it's true. That was a lived experience. I had a desk in the back next to a window, and it was very peaceful, so thank you, Jeremy. I'm very critical of myself in general, but especially creative stuff. For a while, whenever I wrote something, I'd hear this old man's voice in my head like, "Oh, that's not a poem. This is so immature and girly. This isn't serious enough. It's a flash in the pan." And arguing with that doubt made me a better writer in a way, because I was pretty sure about why I placed the words where I put them. I knew all of my references and allusions. I could tie it back to history and science. I just interrogated myself constantly, which is useful when you are a poet putting a manuscript together without an editor, but not as helpful in daily life. It's important to be aware of myself and my actions and adjustments, but it's also important to go to work and class without feeling like I'm ruining everything I touch. I'm getting better, I hope. I had an unreasonable goal for the book. I thought it would be longer, but I just did not have enough time to get that much work publishable. Like, it's still a good size thing. It's not concussion worthy by itself, but definitely some major bruising if used at the right angle. And also, it feels really good to know that these aren't all of my poems. It's not everything that I've ever written, it's only the ones that would fit best with the thesis and concept that I decided on for the thing, and that feels great. When I was putting it together, I found full poems that I'd forgotten about, and to be clear, I'm an English major, but I'm not taking any creative writing courses. I've been neck deep in other subjects since September. This was truly something that I did on the weekends, and it was hard. Switching from hardcore academic writing to emotional poetry, not even the topics so much as the linguistics and grammar. For the last 3 weeks or so, I've really done nothing except work on the book. I only left my house to walk my dog over spring break. I skipped class to edit, and I've never been able to do that before, just prioritize art over everything else, or had the space to do it, even if I do have homework to catch up on, and that also felt really good, and I'm proud of myself for finishing it all, as new and uncomfortable as that feels to say. So today's fact is that I'm Rhiannon McGavin. My forthcoming book is called Branches. It's out this June, and I have no idea what I'm doing. Later, nerds.
What gave me the most anxiety throughout this whole process is when I would say that I was working on a book and then someone would ask, "Oh, like your memoirs? Memoirs? At 19? Do I look like an ignoramus?"